Hello, and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And today we're continuing our run through the Power Six conferences, breaking down each of them. And we're taking a stop to the Atlantic Ocean to take a look at the ACC. Tim, you ready to go?
Let's run it.
Let's do it. So, Tim, you want to break down the ACC real quick for us?
Yeah, so the ACC, you see, you've of course got your premier teams.
Of course, I see the ACC.
I sure hope so. You got your teams like the Duke Blue Devils and North Carolina is always going to be up there, but you've got some surprises in the upper echelon this year. Teams like Notre Dame and Miami are cracking that top four for the first time in a while, and I know you like to see that, Drew. So you've got some surprise teams up there, but overall they've been a pretty solid conference. But of course, they're a very big conference. So I would say the lower half of the conference is you see a lot of losing records in there just because of the fact that you've got a lot of teams to play and a lot of decent teams where a lot of their conference records are going to kind of down their records overall. But you've got some pretty solid teams up here at the top, starting with, of course, one of the best teams in all of college basketball.
Yeah, well, before we get into the individual teams, one thing I want to say is that this ACC is a lot weaker than it is in years past.
Yes, we've seen the ACC be a very, very powerhouse conference in the past where some of those top four are not quite as dominant as we're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's get into one of the most dominant teams in college basketball, the Duke Blue Devils. And the major storyline with this team is quite obvious. Coach Mike Krzyzewski, it's his last ride. Coach K's final season in a historic career with the Duke Blue Devils, and he's got a team that can win it all. They're projected as a 2 seed right now, a high 2 seed, but the thing about Duke is that the size and athleticism that they have can create mismatches at every single position, every single starting position. They have prospects in the NBA draft from Paolo Banchero, Wendell Moore, Mark Williams, Trevor Keels, AJ Griffin, all the way down the line. This Duke Blue Devils team is ready to go, and they are prepped for March.
Yeah, they are absolutely one of the premier offenses in all of college basketball. They're really going all out to make legendary Coach K's last season a memorable one. And I think it obviously all revolves around Paolo Banchero. He's been a beast for the Blue Devils, and as a freshman, of course, leading the team in points and rebounds. And he's absolutely solidified himself as a top 5 pick due to his size, athleticism, and his solid shooting for all parts of the floor.
Yeah, this Duke team has the makings of a national championship squad. It's just the obvious question. You have to play the games. You got to play the ACC tournament, and you got to play the national tournament. How far can this Duke Blue Devils team go? But yeah, it's very clear.
They're a really complete team.
Mm-hmm. It's very clear that Duke is going to be sitting at the top of the conference. But as we climb a step lower in the rung of the ACC, we see the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, which
this is our first big surprise in my opinion.
They're not normally here. They're not normally known for their basketball prowess, but at 21-8 and 14-4 in ACC play, that's good for second in the conference right now. And in large part, it's due to the play of Blake Wesley. He leads the team in points. He's good on the defensive end, leading the team in steals, and he's looking like a first-round pick right now. He's got Notre Dame firmly pegged as a 9 seed, and the Irish, they're certainly fighting.
Yeah, no kidding. They've definitely been a bit of a surprise this season with a solid conference record and record overall. But they're a pretty balanced offensive team. And I think the one team that works really well from there is they can light you up from 3. They shoot almost 38% as a team, and they've shown that they can catch fire really at any moment, which of course is big for extending leads, but also getting back in the game if you've been down some points. But they really turned it on in the second half of the season. They've won 14 out of their last 17 in the second half. So they're a team playing good basketball heading into March, which makes them a team to definitely watch out in this conference tournament.
Mm-hmm. When you go on the road against Wake Forest, which is another good team, and you host Duke and you win those games, it's definitely proving that Notre Dame can stick with the class of the ACC, and they're going to look to make some noise at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. But after that, we'll go to another blue blood, North Carolina. They're third right now. They're 14-5 in conference play. And this is a team that has been fighting for a spot in the month of February, and they've been making their case as of late. They've won 6 of their last 7. It certainly helps when you're trying to get an at-large bid, when you are the North Carolina Tar Heels. Being that big name in college basketball certainly helps, but over the past couple of weeks, their play has certainly backed it up. They're on the outside looking in right now. They're in the first 4 out, and I think a big ACC tournament can clinch an at-large bid for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one. They're, of course, one of the most historic programs in all of college basketball, but they've hit some sort of uncharacteristic bumps along the way in Hubert Davis's first season, taking over for former coach Roy Williams. But they're still a very talented, very solid basketball team. And of course, they've been playing pretty good basketball in the second half of the season. But I feel like most of their losses that they've run into have been plagued by poor defense leading into inconsistent offense. Because in some of those games, it's caused them to lose pretty big. And I think that's one of the reasons why they find them even at the record that they have in the first 4 out, because when they've lost pretty significantly. And when they have their defense clicking, it makes their offense that much more dynamic and hard to stop. So I think that's got to be a big focus for them going into this conference tournament, because they're going to need their defense to step up to help out their offense against some of these better teams.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at their record, they're 22-8 overall. You might think, oh, why isn't North Carolina in the tournament like as an at-large bid right now? But I think you hit the nail right on the head with those inconsistencies kind of dragging them down a little bit. And, when it comes time for Selection Sunday and you're picking those teams for the at-large bids, they really do like to look in between the lines and look past the records. And that's definitely what they're doing here for North Carolina. So after that, I think it's time to take a trip down to South Beach, which, oh man, that's going to be nice in about a week for me. That's where I'm going for spring break. Woohoo! But we'll be going to Miami and taking a look at the Hurricanes. They're 20-9, 12-6 in conference play, sitting in 4th in the ACC, and they're incredibly inconsistent. I mean, they have some guys that can play: Cam McGusty, Isaiah Wong, Sam Wardenberg. They have the talent. I mean, they have wins at Duke and Durham, at Wake Forest, and at Virginia Tech and Blacksburg, but they were also swept by Florida State and Virginia. So, I mean, in December and early January, they went on a 9-game winning streak. And then they kind of came back to earth, and they've dropped a couple games lately. They're going to need to clinch the tournament berth with wins on the road against Boston College and Syracuse, teams that, granted, they should beat, but then again, it's conference games on the road. They're not easy. They're currently projected to be an 11 seed right now, but who knows? They're certainly on the bubble as of right now.
Yeah, losing those games has definitely sort of dropped their status a little bit in terms of tournament projection. But for me personally, what I have seen out of this team is I see them for the potential and some of their best games. And in my opinion, I very much believe them to be a top 3 team in this conference in terms of talent, quite possibly top 2, because when they've played some of their best basketball, they've played really well, of course, knocking off Duke at Duke, which is a very hard place to play. And I don't think their record speaks to their talent, because they've just been on the wrong end of a lot of close games. Out of the 6 losses they've had in the second half of the season, 5 of them have been within 5 points or less, and 3 of them have been 1-point losses. So if you want to talk about that luck stat, I feel like Miami's really got to be up there, because they've been on the wrong end of a lot of really close games. So I feel like they really have the ability to play up there with the best of the best. They've just got to get back to some of that consistency that put them on that 9-game winning streak in the first half of the season.
Yeah, no, they definitely can. They have the potential to be a very, very good team in this conference. It's just that when you go in the conference tournament, it's, can you refine that magic that made you so good in the middle portion of the season? But let's take a trip down Tobacco Road. We'll go to Wake Forest and take a look at the Demon Deacons. And this is a team that started the season absolutely red hot. They were a shoo-in for the NCAA tournament. But then they've been slipping, and they keep slipping, and they keep slipping. And now they're right with North Carolina in the first 4 out, and they're on the bubble. they're the best shooting team in this conference. So, they can shoot lights out. They're shooting almost 60% from the field. So Wake Forest has potential to light it up offensively. It's just, can they get back to what made them so successful at the start of the season?
Yeah, for me, what I saw out of this team is that they're a star heavy lightning in a bottle offense. And they can score in bunches, but lately I feel like what they've been struggling with is just to score enough to edge out some of these top teams in the conference, because they've been coming up just short lately in a lot of these games. Obviously led by Alondes Williams, averaging 19.4 points a game. So he's a great guy to have leading your offense. And he's been one of the efficient and effective all-around players in the conference, averaging, of course, 19.4 points per game, but also 6.7 rebounds per game, 5.1 assists per game, and 1.2 steals per game. So he's another guy that does a little bit of everything, and that's a really solid stat line to have as one of your top scorers, to have them dip into those other categories as well. And I feel like when he's clicking, the Demon Deacons are really tough to handle. It's just whether or not he can keep it going and have other guys supporting him heading into this conference tournament.
Yeah, don't forget about Jake LaRavia too, because you talked about the stat line for Alondes Williams. Jake LaRavia is right near, either slightly below or slightly above Alondes Williams in a lot of those stat categories.
Yeah, they've got two very balanced guys.
So that's a pretty potent 1-2 punch. It's just that the rest of the lineup, can they keep that production that
where they struggle to get that production and that efficiency out of the rest of those guys? Yeah.
After that, let's go to Virginia Tech, take a look at the Hokies. And when I look at VT, they are a dark horse to win the ACC tournament, in my opinion, because we look at that luck stat. We've been looking at it a lot today. Virginia Tech, also pretty unlucky. And they're 19-11, but they're outside the top 25 in offensive efficiency and right outside the top 60 in defensive efficiency. So this team has some guys, Kiva Luma, Justin Mutz, that can play with the rest of the ACC. They just haven't really shown it as of late.
Yeah, and what I've seen out of this team is they're a team that goes pretty deep into their bench. And one of the things that I think that is very solid for them that they get out of the bench is they get a very solid three-point shooting. They struggled with some of their defense during the middle of the season, but they've really turned it on as of late, winners of 9 out of their last 10 games. And their defense has really, really turned it on lately. In those 10 games, they've held teams to an average of just over 60 points a game. So if they can keep that defense going and keep shooting the ball well, they really have a chance to do some damage to a lot of teams. And I feel like that's definitely a reason why they can be a dark horse team in this conference tournament.
Yeah, playing red hot is important when it comes down the stretch. And after that, we'll take a look at Virginia and the Cavaliers. Now, you mentioned how Virginia Tech runs deep. Virginia is incredibly top heavy. They have 4 guys that play 30 minutes a game, 1 guy that plays more than 20 minutes a game, and the rest play very little or not at all. So when you're relying on your stars that much, almost to seismic proportions, you won't exactly be able to hang with teams that are at your level or are better than you late in games. And that's crucial for Virginia.
Yeah, of course, as a program, they've definitely fallen off a little bit since their national championship run back in 2019. But I feel like the story of this team in the second half has been they've struggled to put points on the board as a team, of course, outside of leading scorer Jaden Gardner, slotting in at 15.5 points per game. And especially as of late, they've dropped 3 out of their last 4 games. And their defense has played well, managing to keep teams in the low to mid 60s in that little stretch, but they just haven't been able to score the ball. And I feel like that's one of the things that they're just going to have to figure out, where their offense is going to come from outside of Gardner, so their team can actually get a lead or hold on to leads, so they can beat some of these teams that are in theory better than them or more balanced than them in this conference.
Simply put, FIO, figure it out.
Yeah. We've got a lot to figure out.
Yeah. When you talk about programs that have fallen off a bit or had some down years, look no further than Syracuse. 15-15. They're 9-10 in conference play. And this is a team that was in the NCAA tournament last year. They were a very good team, but they've lost their last 3 in a row, and they need a lot. And that's putting it lightly to make the tournament. namely of which they need Buddy Boeheim to be last March's Buddy Boeheim. Are you going to see
Take over, buddy.
Yeah, are you going to see volume shooter Buddy or poise deficient Buddy? Because both can show up, but that team runs through Buddy Boeheim, and depending on which guy shows up, Syracuse will go with that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've noticed is they're not quite the typical makeup of the Syracuse teams of old, where offense has really actually taken precedence to defense. And this Orange team is electric from the 3-point line. Obviously, Buddy Boeheim, the scorer that he is, and he's turned himself into a very dynamic scorer outside of just like the 3-ball and whatnot. And they also have 4 other players who score over 12 points a game. But the problem is outside of that, the rest of the guys are pretty much just bodies on the floor for them. The drop off goes from 12 points per game all the way down to 3.3. So you've got like those top 5 scorers, and then who knows past that. So that's one of the things that I feel like they've really struggled with is outside of those 5 guys is can they get production out of literally anybody else, especially if they get into foul trouble.
Definitely a down year for the Orange. And now that we've taken a look at a decent chunk of the teams in the ACC, we've taken a look at about half of them, which is surprising. This conference has 15 teams. Geez, we left a lot out. But those are the relevant teams that have played really well this year in the conference. So let's make our picks. Who's going to win the ACC, Tim?
You've obviously you talk about this one being not quite as powerful of a conference as it usually is. And that's where I feel like it opens the door to some of the other teams of, if they're playing the right basketball at the right time, I feel like they can really push themselves into this conference championship and maybe even push one over. And here's where I'm actually going to have to put faith into a team that I've seen play some good basketball earlier on the season, and I think they have the ability to turn it around and really make some noise. I got to go with the U. I really think that they're going to be able. I think that they're going to be able to turn it around, get back to some of that Miami play of old that got them into that top 25, top 15 consideration earlier on in the year. And I think that they have the ability to surprise Duke once again, the way they surprised them at Cameron Indoor this year. So I'm actually going to ride with the U.
Wow, that's surprising. And I mean, my question to you, which since I figured that you weren't picking Duke, my question to you was who's going to beat Duke, but you answered that. Miami did on the road earlier this season.
They've proven that they have a formula to do it. It's whether or not they can replicate that performance. And I think they will be able to.
And that's where I differ from you, because I don't think that Miami is going to quite recapture what made them so good earlier in the year. I think they can get back to a certain level of it. I mean, it would be nice if the Hurricanes could prove me wrong.
It'd be very nice for you.
Oh, yes, it would. I would enjoy that very, very much. But then again, I think my question still stands. Other than Miami, who's going to beat Duke? And that's who I have winning the ACC. Coach K's last season, this team has the talent. They have the horses. And because the ACC is so weak this year, I think that only furthers my confidence in Duke. Because when Duke,
they most likely won't have a whole lot of resistance going up to that championship game, most likely.
Not nearly as much as they usually have.
Yeah.
So that instills the confidence in me that Duke can win the ACC tournament outright.
It's a very sensible pick, so I can't blame you for that one.
Yeah. So that is all we got for the ACC. We have 2 conferences left. We'll take a trip to the SEC before taking a look at Tim's conference to wrap it up, the Big Ten. Stay tuned for more college basketball content all March long. We sleep in May, as John Rothstein says. But like and subscribe for more Running the Table content. And until next time, we out.